guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, "Neighbor built a trash mountain that collapsed on my property. I got his business shut down. I have a neighbor that runs a business on his property that I would call sketchy at best. It is fixing cars, and I can see in his backyard that he is using old parts on people's cars and then boasts about how he only uses brand new high-quality parts. Now you know that we are already dealing with a pretty bad human being to have fixing your car. He might be a decent neighbor though, right? No, he is just as bad at being a neighbor as he is at everything else. I was never dumb enough to trust my car with this guy, so at least the story isn't going to be about how he destroyed my car. No, instead my issue with this guy is he tends to pile up all the trash and broken parts from his business right on the line between our two properties. Some of which, by the way, I knew for a long time has probably been creeping up slightly onto my side of the property, but I had never done anything about it. I just want to give you guys a mental imagine of what it looks like on the side of my backyard. I know you would have preferred a real image, but hindsight is 20/20 and that opportunity has come and gone. There are broken car parts like bumpers and engines all mashed together. Then there are tires, and just by the looks of it I could bet this guy makes most of his sales just replacing tires. He had giant stacks of them that if he kept going would probably have become a tall fence between our houses. Very rarely do I see him actually go into this stack and get a tire, so they really are just part of the trash that he doesn't want to pay to dispose of. Over time it just got bigger, and since it was such a slow progression, I admit that I became a little compliant with it to avoid talking to him. I could sometimes hear him screaming at customers that argued prices, and that voice was enough to scare me. I have some social anxiety, so unless there was a reason I had to go and talk to this neighbor, I was going to try and avoid it. Then it finally happened, and I had a reason to go and talk to him after one day when it got a little bit too windy outside. Some of you might see where this is going or read the title of the story. His entire mountain of trash came down, and it came down all over my property. Car parts and tires not only littered my lawn but actually destroyed more than that. I have a greenhouse outside, and if you don't know, those things are basically made of glass. One of the tire piles fell right towards my greenhouse and smashed the roof, shattering the glass everywhere. All the flowers inside were completely destroyed between the glass and the tires, crushing them. So, my angry won out against my social anxiety, and I walked on over to his house to tell him what had happened. Me. Excuse me? Neighbor. Yeah? I'm working on a car for a customer. What do you want? Me. The wind last night knocked your tower of garbage onto my property. Neighbor. Don't go calling my stuff garbage, which is some quality parts. I can guarantee you that they were garbage and not even the slightest bit usable. But I wasn't going to start that argument and just wanted to tell him about the damage instead of riling him up. Me. Sorry, anyway, the mountain you made of it collapsed onto my property last night. A stack of tires actually went through my greenhouse roof and destroyed it. Neighbor. What do you want me to do about it? Not my fault that you can't keep your property safe. Me. I mean, it was your stuff that destroyed it and is all over my backyard. I thought you should do something about it. Neighbor. Look, I'm busy and don't have time to teach you how to take care of your property. Also, if my stuff is on your land, I expect you to either return it to me or pay me for the things that I lost. I can sue you for something like that, you know. I was in shock that not only did he not seem to care about what he did, but the fact he wanted me to pay for or clean up his mountain of trash. I was going to do neither one of those things, and instead I was going to make sure that he got everything that was coming to him. Step 1 was suing him for repairs to my greenhouse after taking pictures of the damage and what sort of remained of the stacks of tires on the property line for my lawyer. It was a pretty open and shut case with them finding he was at fault and had to pay for the repairs. That was only the start of what I was going to do with him. My first call was to sanitation about his backyard being hazardous to health and full of trash. They came to investigate and agreed that it was not allowed for him to have a mountain of trash and broken car parts. He was forced to pay to get it all hauled away, and by this point he was not happy. I didn't get yelled at though, because like the smart coward I am, I hid from him in my house and did not answer the door when he came knocking. He is twice my size, and I don't even want to take a guess at what he might be capable of. Finally, I made one last call into the IRS about his business because I knew a guy like him was not paying taxes. Of course, a business not paying taxes is like free candy to the IRS, and they sent somebody to check out his business and see that it was a real business that he had never filed anything for. No permits, no taxes being paid, no nothing. They shut him down right away and he was forced to pay a huge amount to the IRS that he just didn't have. He had to sell his car and move somewhere cheaper just in order to pay them. That was why I waited to do this last, to make sure he had money to pay for my greenhouse and to get the trash taken away. That couldn't have helped his budget when it came to the IRS. Before he moved, he did come to my door one last time yelling about knowing it was all because of me and that karma was going to bite me in the ass. I actually thought that was hilarious, because if this guy actually believed in karma, then he had a funny way of showing it by scamming people and refusing to ever do the right thing. If anything, karma was that little windstorm that caused his trash pile to come down in the first place. I hope if karma hits him again, though it won't be at the expense of a greenhouse. The next story is entitled Homeowner Says Tree Expert is Wrong. Here's a bit of a backstory to this story. My job causes me to deal with Karens on a regular basis. This is one that sticks out. I do vegetation management for power companies. Basically, this means that I trim, remove trees so that the power lines stay clear. As a result, I have to deal with trees in yards. Each power company has their own spec that we have to meet. I have worked in this industry for nearly 6 years now. One of the first things we need to learn, other than safe saw operation, is tree species identification. At the time of this story, I have worked there for about 3 years. It was during the middle of February in a cold climate. We had stopped at this house where the tree in the yard was just inches away from the power line. We consider these hazard trees. The tree was a willow. Willows are fast-growing trees, and since it was February it had no leaves on it, and we figured it would contact the phase when it leafed out. We talked to the lady, the Karen of the story, and told her what we needed to do. We were trimming for a power cooperative, let's call this power company A, PCA. She was mad at us because she did now get her power from PCA. She told us tell our boss to bury the line. I had politely explained to her that we are just contracted by PCA and that getting the line buried was something she needed to work out with them. After a little bit we talked her into doing the work after highlighting the dangers of having the tree that close to the line. We then go get set up, get the chipper into place and start trimming. Karen comes running out of the house and screams at me. What are you doing trimming this tree in the dead of winter? You're supposed to wait until summer. You're going to kill it. The best time to trim trees is when they are dormant. I explained to her that we needed to trim the tree now because if it leafed out it could make contact with the line. At this point she decided to yell at me for other trees that have died and been removed in the past. I walk with her to her front yard, keeping her distracted and away from my coworker who was trimming the tree. She then starts yelling at me for how the willows in the front yard looks because we keep marking it flat. I told her that this is not our line, that it was Power Company B, a for-profit company in the area. I told her that PCB had a different policy on trimming trees and that it doesn't have any effect on what we do. After this I'm able to convince her that her tree will be just fine, and she goes into the house. After about 15 minutes my coworker takes off a full lead from the tree. I am able to reach it from the ground, so I grab my saw and slice off the stub left. It was 3 feet long and 4 inches across. Karen then storms back out of the house and yells that was uncalled for. I said more, then asked, "You wanted that left there? It would have been an eyesore." She yells more about how we are killing the tree. I assure her that willows are extremely resilient. I told her we could cut it to the ground, and it would grow back in 10 years. It's hard to kill a willow if you want to. Now she's going on a verbal rampage and becoming very rude and personally attacking us. Telling us we cut enough and that she has lived here for 40 years, and we don't have a right to do it. I was as polite as I could be with her. We told her we have to get 10 feet, and if she didn't stop, I was going to get a tape measure out and we would take exactly 10 feet and leave it look like whatever it will. After this she turns and takes 2 steps for her door, turns back to me and says, "Oh, it's not a willow tree. It's a planted tree." Then storms back to the house. I looked up at my coworker and asked him, "What's a planted tree?" We just started laughing at the absurdity of what she said. For the next year we called every willow tree a planted tree. The next story is entitled Neighbor Throws a Party. I was really hoping my neighbor would settle down, but here we are, though this story has a satisfying ending, I think. This just happened last night and I'm still a bit tired, so I'm sorry for any spelling mistakes. Our neighbor had been quiet for a while and my SO, and I thought maybe she had finally realized she couldn't control the whole building. One of her cars was parked in her spot and the other was parked on the street behind my SO's car. Nobody's washing had been ripped off the line, no new notes were stuck to doors. Until yesterday. As we are the bottom unit, apartment, we have a side door that opens out onto the shared yard. I think the only time I use that door is to air the place out or as a shortcut to hang washing out. Sorry. Anyway, yesterday we were going about our day when we saw entitled neighbor and a few other people setting up tables and chairs in the yard. No big deal, it's shared space. A few minutes later there's a knock on the side door and it's her. SO opened the door, it's a glass sliding door so she could see us, we couldn't pretend we weren't there, and did the usual greetings. She told us she was having a party and we needed to move our wooden planters off our patio because she needed the space for her barbecue. No. Firstly, the patio is our space, not shared space, and secondly they sit right next to the glass door, so I don't want some random looking into my living room all night while they are cooking. SO reminded her she doesn't own the building and we wouldn't be moving shit when one of her friends asked what the hell was she doing. They had already set up the barbecue in the yard. She huffed and walked off without saying anything us, and we thought that was it. It was not. A few hours go by, and we ended closing the curtains for privacy. Whoever designed this building didn't really keep privacy in mind for a detail, but anyway. We can hear talking, laughing and cooking, the usual sounds of a backyard party when there's another knock on the door. I was cooking dinner so my SO answered it again. This time it was one of her friends saying she had to use the bathroom and entitled neighbor told her to just knock on our door instead of walking upstairs. SO politely told her sorry but she couldn't use ours and she apologized for knocking and intruding. Not even 2 minutes later there's banging on the door and by now my SO is pissed. He opened the door and entitled neighbor started to lay into him about how dare he expect her guests to go all the way upstairs and that he needed to apologize to her and keep the door open for her guests. Now my SO is usually a calm guy, very easy to talk to and rational, but in that moment, he lost his shit. He told her to duck off and stop bothering us, to get her head out of her ass and she can't lay claim to everything she sees. Our bathroom wasn't hers to use. Her guests could use her bathroom and if she knocked on our door again, he would call the police for harassment. At this point one of her friends came over and told entitled neighbor she needed to leave us alone and stop bugging us before apologizing and telling us to have a good night. We expected the party to be loud and go on all night, but it actually wrapped up pretty early, about 1 a.m. I think. This morning when I got up everything had been cleaned up from the yard, but our planters had been knocked over. Jokes on her because we hadn't planted anything in them yet and most of the soil in there was used cat litter. I use potting mix as cat litter because it's cheaper. So now she can smell my cat's old turds. The next story is titled, Hold the Train. This just happened in front of me. I'm on my way home from the city by train. The specific train I'm on is an express, but you can grab a local train at one of 3 stops before the end of the line. Type of deal where a local train from start to finish would take 2 hours, but an express shave of 45 minutes. Luckily for me I get off at an express stop, so I never have to worry which train I board unless I'm gonna be late for work. So, we're about to approach the last express stop, and a woman waves down the ticket collector, TC, asking if the train can be held at the stop for a few minutes. TC says no, because you know, trains have a schedule to follow. Woman. Can't you make an exception? It'll be for 5 minutes max. TC. We can't do that, miss. Woman. I'm begging you, please. Just 5 minutes, I work part-time. TC. What? Woman. I work part-time, it's hard for me to catch my train. Please hold it just until we get there. TC. I'm not understanding you. Do you want us to hold this train so you can get to work? Woman. No, the local train. It leaves the station before we get there. And I'm trying to catch it. Just for 5 minutes. TC. You want me to call dispatch, to call another train, and ask them to hold it? Woman. Only for 5 minutes. I miss it every day, and I get to work late. I only work part-time, I'm a student. TC looks confused as hell and tells her she needs to either take an earlier express to catch the local, or board a local to begin with in the city. But the express is faster, and it's only 5 minutes. Needless to say, they didn't call in to hold the train. The last story is titled, Child Tries to Steal Money, Parents Say I Should Give It to Him. This happened a couple years ago before COVID, but it still makes me laugh. Me and a friend were at a bowling alley, not bowling but playing pool at the front. The building also had an arcade and laser quest etc. We were there midday, maybe 1 to 2 p.m. on a weekend, so the arcade was flooded with kids. Me and my friend were near the bar playing pool away from the rest of the arcade. Pool was £1 a game and the change machine that gave £1 coins didn't work, so we had to use the 50p machine nearer the arcade. I put a £5 note in the machine and went to put in a second, when a child comes over and tries to take the coins in the tray at the bottom. I notice him and put my hand in the way so he can't take them. Once I pick them up, he is trying to get the coins out of my hand. I bring my hand up so he can't reach, and he starts crying, when of course his mother comes over to see the kid pointing at my hand and crying. I know it looked like I probably took something off him, so I was kind of awkward and didn't know what to say. I assumed she would be understanding, and I tried to explain. She wasn't understanding. She started ranting that I must have taken his money and wouldn't let me get a word in. Eventually a member of staff comes over and asks what happened. With the child's mother ranting, another member of staff comes over and separates us. I explain I was just getting change and the child was trying to take the coins from the machine whilst I was putting in another note. They understand and asked what I actually did when the child took the coins. I explained the kid didn't actually get the coins before I got to them. The person using the other change machine also vouches for me. I get the rest of my change and go back to my friend at the pool tables. I should note, the entire time I was talking to the member of staff the child was screaming and his mother hadn't stopped ranting. I'm not sure if the staff kicked them out or they left, but the last I saw of them was at the front door, with the member of staff stood by the entrance. I honestly feel kinda bad for the kid who must have only been like 4 to 5 years old. He was wandering around unsupervised in an arcade, probably unable to even play anything, and then stuck with his ranting mother before being dragged out. Why take your kid to an arcade and not give them money to play anything? I've learned my lesson and now I know to take the change as soon as possible when there's children in the vicinity. Thank you for listening.